welcome into Last Call. We've got so much on the docket today, a very busy sports show. Nathaniel, Finch, and Caden, Colford. We're going to talk about UIndy's weekend at the GLVC tournament. We're going to talk about some Division I basketball. They've got their conference tournaments, and of course it's March, so March Madness coming up. Don't forget about the Pacers, a good weekend for them. Some racing as well. We've got a loaded show, Caden.
No, we have a lot. I mean, like you said, racing. UIndy was in St. Charles. I don't know if they're satisfied coming home, but no doubt they had a solid season and a solid weekend in St. Charles.
Let's introduce Graham Shear. Graham was in St. Charles with me. We had a great weekend out there watching some UIndy basketball. And, Graham, it'd be good to get your thoughts on the game. Let's start with this women's team. Of course, they got a big win to win their first conference tournament game in 6 years. That was against Missouri S&T. Didn't quite have the same success the next day, but it was a good season for the women's team.
Right, and, I mean, everything was clicking on all cylinders on Friday against Missouri S&T. They had just blown them out the week prior by 16, but they got this win by 30 points. Maybe their best win, best offensive performance overall as a team on the entire season. So it's very impressive to see them get this win and eventually move on into the GLVC semifinal. It was a fantastic game by the Greyhounds.
No, yeah, I'd love to see some of their performances. Sadie Hill, 21 points and 13 boards. Liv Becker had 19. I mean, it was a pretty impressive little game for them. Winning by 30 points does not happen a lot with this team. It was pretty fun watching what they were able to do.
And Nathaniel, I mean, we talked about on the broadcast that Sadie Hill had just gotten, all GLVC second team in that game, and it was impressive to see her kind of come out because she came out ferocious. She had just gotten second team, and we heard her and Coach Mark Mitchell say that they didn't believe that there were 10 better players in the conference than Sadie Hill, and she came out and showed everybody what she's made of, what her game entails, and it was impressive.
Yeah, and of course they didn't quite get the win against Drury, but guys, I mean, it's still a very successful season for the squad. Mark Mitchell's opening year. What do we think of the season as a whole?
I mean, it was hard to know what to expect coming in, right? A lot of new faces and a completely new coaching staff, but I'd say he really created a great culture with this team. They all played well together. They came together as one, as Coach Jowers loves to say, as one, go Hounds, right? But at the end of the season, when you play a #2 team in the country in Drury, that's a high standard to live up to.
Yeah, Drury went on to win the conference tournament, so they get their automatic bid. I mean, they were going to be in anyway, the #2 seed in the Midwest there. It was a pretty impressive weekend, an impressive season for UIndy's women's team, though. They're going to be losing a couple people, though. What do we think? What does the outlook look like for next year?
So Maya Scheidt, she was a graduate student this year. She's going to be gone. Sadie Hill was a senior this year. She's probably going to be gone as well. So you lose two of your biggest leaders on the court. I think that they're going to take a hit that way because, I mean, Sadie Hill was their best player this year. It was her team. Somebody else is going to have to step up moving forward.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. How about we move on and talk about this men's squad? Again, similarly, impressive win on Thursday. Couldn't win in the second round, so they end up falling out of the tournament. But they end up having a nice little win here against Quincy in double overtime.
Yeah, it was a very impressive win. But, my biggest problem with this Greyhounds victory was that I didn't really think they played their best basketball throughout. I mean, they only scored 60 points going in, in regulation, 30 in the first half, 30 in the second half. They didn't really score that many points. It took a while for, all these Greyhounds to get going. Kendrick Choa had 23 points. He was really the only guy that had his offensive game in rhythm the entire, throughout the whole duration of the game. It was 5 of 7 shooting, but 23 and 13. He just won the GLVC Player of the Year, and he came out and showed that, Nathaniel.
Yeah, and it was a really impressive day from him. It kind of validated them voting him as a Player of the Year because, there's plenty of great guys in the GLVC that it could have been. But when he comes in and has that type of game right off the bat, all eyes on him in that 1-8 matchup, it was pretty sweet to see. How about this guy right here, though, Ben Nickerson? What a game he had down the stretch. We were questioning why he had the ball so much at times, but then he started to pull through, and, it was pretty obvious why. Coach Corsaro had some great belief in him.
And he had 8 points in the game. And not a lot of other stats other than those 8 points, but I think that a lot of his, capabilities and statistics don't really show up in, the box score because his defense is just so impressive, and he was the guy with the ball in his hands down the stretch that made all the right moves. He clicked all the right buttons, and that helped them come out with the win.
I mean, Coach Corsaro said it himself. He said, "Thank God we had Ben Nickerson."
Oh, yeah.
He didn't think they'd win this game without him.
I mean, he's everything you want from a point guard, right? He has a great understanding of his teammates, where they're on the floor. I mean, he's a great communicator. He runs an offense well, a great game manager. I mean, he's just everything a coach wants in his guy.
Yeah, he'll be graduating 4 straight years. He got the sportsmanship award, though. He's one of those guys. Of course, his great-grandfather, the legendary Angus Nickerson for UIndy, their best coach of all time. Of course, Coach Corsaro. I mean, if he sticks around for a decade or so, he could be right there. But Nickerson played a great game. These guys, they played a great game on Thursday. Couldn't quite get it done against UMSL, though. How about we kind of look ahead into this NCAA tournament? They're still the #1 seed, which means that Midwest region, it's going to be hosted here at Nickerson Hall. Come out and watch. If not, we'll have coverage of that for sure. But, guys, this is going to be interesting to see how UIndy can do. You see here they'll play Saturday at 5 o'clock against McKendree, who's the GLVC tournament champions. Hillsdale, Northern Michigan playing at 2:30, or rather 7:30 there. Bottom half of the bracket, Ashland and Ferris State should be a good game, and then UMSL, a 2 seed. They kind of climbed up pretty quick. They had a great last few games. Obviously lost to McKendree, but UMSL up there 2 seed. They'll get Wisconsin Parkside. What are you guys' thoughts on this regional? Will be hosted at Nickerson Hall.
So looking at this regional, I mean, UIndy's the 1 seed, but they've kind of faltered here as of late. They've lost 2 of their last 4, I should say, both of them against UMSL. And when you looked at that bracket, UMSL is now the #2 team in the region. I mean, it all boils down to if they can get a win, because right now it looks to me as if it's going to be UIndy UMSL in, just because they're the 1 and 2 seed doesn't really mean anything. But they're the 2 best teams in the conference, in my opinion, or in that region, I should say. And I think that they're going to have to go through the Tritons if they have any shot at getting into that Elite 8.
Let's talk about that first matchup. It's going to be UIndy and it's going to be McKendree. The Hounds in Nickerson Hall blew them out by 25 points, but this is a different McKendree squad. How do we feel about the Bearcats?
They're getting hot at the right time. That's what I think, right? They beat an UMSL team, and I don't think anybody went in that game saying, wow, McKendree's really going to pull this one out. But, I mean, they felt that way. They come out, they started shooting the ball lights out, and they looked to the same against the Greyhounds. And that's the thing about basketball. When you get hot, you're hot, and you can pull out games like this big one against UIndy.
You took the words right out of my mouth. We talked out a bunch on the broadcast that it was right for UMSL to peak at the right time. Right now, McKendree is peaking as well. 2 teams in the GLVC not named Indianapolis, the Greyhounds. These 2 teams are peaking, and McKendree played maybe their best game of the year. They were hot on Sunday. That was the biggest reason they got it done over UMSL.
What shot do you give UIndy to make it past next Tuesday?
This is a very talented team. I think when they click, when they bring everything together, Jesse Bingham plays his game, Kendrick Joa plays his game, I don't think there's a team that beats them. But it's all about getting things to gel. So you have to have a good start. I mean, crawling back in a game doesn't suit well for the Greyhounds.
And foul trouble is the biggest question, because we saw Kendrick Joa get in foul trouble in the semifinal against UMSL. That was the biggest reason that UIndy fell behind going into the halftime locker room, and they couldn't regroup from there. If he can stay out of foul trouble, then I give the Greyhounds a great shot.
So you give Choa his best game, give Bingham his best game. The squad can hang with anybody. We will see if that is the case or not. Should be exciting, though. Again, come out and support the Hounds. If not, the 3 of us will be on the call in some form or variation of probably all of the 7 games that will be here at Nickerson Hall. So we'll see how that goes. When we come back, how about Purdue and IU big wins? Another conference tournament. That's coming up this upcoming weekend. We'll talk about that and more with Jace Hodge on Last Call.
Hey, it's Giselle here on 88.7 WICR.
88.7 The Diamond, the only jazz and classical station in Indianapolis, completely led by the students of the University of Indianapolis. Listen to us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn app, FM radio, HD radios, or even on our website at wicronline.org, a different kind of public radio.
Welcome back to Last Call. Before we get started about the conference, Big Ten Conference Championship, how about we talk about these 2 games from over the weekend? We'll start with this Purdue game. They played Illinois, that is. They got to celebrate a little bit of Big Ten outright regular season championship. And they played pretty well against Illinois.
They played pretty well, but they had me on the edge of my seat. They let this unranked Illinois team a little too close for comfort, if you ask me. But early in this game, they looked pretty dominating. You know, they did their thing. I mean, they looked like the number 5 seed. But in those later minutes, you'd like to see them expand the lead by a little bit more.
76-71, so they won by 5. Illinois did hit kind of a last-second 3 in garbage time. Didn't mean a whole lot, so you count it as a little bit bigger of a win than that. But you're right. You know, against a team at home like Illinois, you want to see them put up a little bit more of a fight. It was a tale of two halves. We say that so often with this Purdue squad. They played lights out in the first half. They were shooting all over the place. Brandon Newman, a game-high 19 points. He had a great game. You see him hit one there. It was a very impressive first half. Things just kind of slid a little bit in half number 2.
And you talked about Newman. It's great to see him have a good games, because when Purdue gets to these bigger games in the conference tournament and in the NCAA tournament, they're going to need guys like him. They're going to need guys like Braden Smith to step up, not for just a couple minute stretch, not for just a half, but the entire game, if they want to win these huge ones.
Edey had a little bit lower of a game compared to his standards, 17 points, 6 boards. What do you think about him? They did a good job kind of trying to limit him a little bit. 17 is still a good number, but for a guy that's, you know, typically accustomed to 20-plus, 25-plus, they did a good job kind of holding him down. What do you think about them kind of slowing down Edey, but Purdue still getting the win?
I think that's a great sign if you're Purdue, because it's one thing for Zach Edey to go out, drop 35 with 15 rebounds, get the win. But when he has a game like this, 17 points and 6 rebounds, and he finds his teammates pick up the slack, they get things going, and Purdue gets the win. I mean, that's competitive basketball. That's winning basketball.
Yeah, and again, a reminder, Purdue, they win the conference regular season title outright. It was nice that they were able to cut the nets down at the end of this game. They won it in their win at Wisconsin, but they were able to celebrate it with the win here against Illinois. So good for the Boilermakers getting that one there. And how about we move on to the other game that took place in Indiana. This one down in Bloomington, IU against Michigan. And boy, it was a close one. IU started out very hot, cooled off very quickly. Michigan led for most of it. Got into overtime, IU got the win. What do you think?
Michigan gave them everything that IU wanted. I mean, you see great games from the usual guys. Trace Jackson Jr. in his last game at Assembly Hall, 27 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. I mean, those last couple of seconds of him on the floor, I mean, that was pretty emotional.
Yeah, for sure. And also, Race Thompson coming in, had himself a good game, 16 points, 10 rebounds, although almost lost it at the end, couldn't hit, a single free throw out of his last 2 free throw attempts. He definitely got bailed out by the end of it because Michigan made the mistake at the end of the game. IU won it in overtime, but they secure the double bye, which is big. Only 4 teams get that in the tournament. That's a big difference when you're trying to advance past, especially in a tough Big Ten. So IU does a good job. They'll be a 3 seed, means that they, they'll get a couple extra games off here, which is something that they have not had in a while. It was a big difference last year not having that bye where they had to come in and play an extra game or 2.
And it's them playing at Assembly Hall. This is where they're at their best. But still, like Purdue, this is an unranked Michigan team. You'd like to see Indiana, especially at home, kind of extend that gap. They had a very, very solid game, but if you let these teams hang around, then that's not always going to work in your favor.
It was nice that they had, almost 2 completely different games. They started with the big lead. They had to figure out how to play with the lead. Obviously, didn't do too successful. But then they were down 12, and they found a way to get back and force overtime. Then they found a way to win in overtime, really dominated that period. So it was good to see that they were able to kind of get experience in all these different types of games, which is going to be big come March.
I mean, a lot of credit to Michigan, though. Dickinson, 24 points on the day. And we're going to talk about the Big Ten tournament coming up. Michigan, I mean, there's a whole lot of teams that you can look at. Michigan, I mean, they're starting to make a name for themselves in the conference.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and switch gears here. Now, instead, let's take a look at this Big Ten tournament bracket. We're going to bring on Jace Hodge here in a moment to discuss it. But you see Purdue's a 1 seed. Those other 3 teams with the double bye, Indiana, Northwestern, and Michigan State. But then, you look up and down this bracket, Caden and Jace, there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of teams on here that could easily get the win. I mean, Iowa's looked good of late. Rutgers obviously can be tough at times. And, there's Maryland's a ranked team. There's a lot of players, a lot of teams on here that could really find a way to make some damage in this tournament.
And I think for me, Iowa is the underdog of this tournament. Iowa, yes, they lost to Nebraska at home on Sunday. A bad loss for them, but Nebraska is hot recently. But Iowa has proven they can beat anybody. They swept IU, including a win at Assembly Hall by 22 points, which is very impressive because IU's only lost 2 games all year at home. And Iowa also had that comeback win against Michigan State, who they might have to face in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I think the Hawkeyes, they do make a good little sleeper team. When they're on and they shoot the way that they can, I mean, they can compete with anybody. You mentioned what they did down in Assembly Hall. So, I feel like this is obviously Purdue's ranked, top 5 in the nation, number 1 in this tournament. You would think that they're the favorites to get out of it, but I don't know if any one team feels like they got the best shot to get out of this. This is going to be, like it always is, a tough Big Ten tournament.
In the Big Ten, the end of the year was absolutely chaotic. 7 teams were tied 2nd through 9th. In the last game of the season, there were so many scenarios to go around. Finally, you get the bracket set once and for all. And really, any team can win this at this point.
Isn't that crazy, though, that IU, they got the 3 seed. If they would have lost in overtime, just 1 or 2 little bounces don't go their way. Suddenly, they're all the way down to an 8 seed. So it's like you said, there's that much of a variation here between getting the double bye, having to play an extra game, and that just goes to tell you how competitive the Big Ten is, how tough this next weekend is going to be at the United Center up in Chicago.
And if I'm not mistaken, there was once a 6-way tie for second in the Big Ten, which is absolutely crazy. You mentioned Rutgers, and Rutgers just has a thing for knocking off big teams in big moments. And then there's Northwestern, who's had both Purdue's number and IU's number this season, so they're also looking to knock off the Big Two.
All right, how about Chase? You give me your pick. Who's going to win the Big Ten tournament?
So I think it'll come down to Purdue-IU Part 3, but this time I think Purdue will win it. As an IU fan, it hurts me to say, but I don't think IU can beat a good team 3 times in a row.
Isn't that going to be awesome, though, if it's Purdue and IU? It worked out perfectly the way the seeding laid out. If IU ended up being a 4 seed, they would have had to play Purdue on Saturday, not in that championship game. But now that, they slid down to that 3 seed, we could have the matchup of matchups here in the Big Ten championship. What do you think?
That would be so fun. I think IU just plays with a chip on their shoulder when they play Purdue. That's what I want to see. I want to see that in the final. IU and Purdue, give me IU. I think they sweep the Boilermakers this season.
Any concerns about the Hoosiers kind of struggling away from home? Obviously, they played well at Mackey, but is there any concern there going into this tournament that maybe they're not going to play their best ball since they're not down in Assembly?
The thing I worry about the most is it's in Illinois. If they have to face either Illinois or Northwestern at some point, it'll be a home game for those 2 teams. And IU might have to go through the Wildcats because 2-seed Wildcats, 3-seed Hoosiers, they might have to face in the semifinals.
This Northwestern team, they got to feel pretty good.
And they're from Chicago, and that game's in Chicago. It'll be a home game for them.
Well, tell you what, we got Pacers coverage coming up next. Let's go ahead and step aside when we come back. Plenty of Pacers.
Award-winning news coverage. Brought to you by ethical journalists that care about you. We have you covered on crime, latest on sports, and the best in entertainment. This is UIndyTV News.
Welcome back to Last Call. Nathaniel, Finch, Caden, Colford, some NBA talk. Let's talk about the Indiana Pacers hitting their stride at the right time, to say the least. You got a 4-game road stand. You think that, Pacers, they'll be lucky if they get away with one of these, and somehow they end up winning 3 of their 4, their 1 loss when Halliburton was not able to play. This was an impressive game, an impressive win, impressive little stretch here for the Pacers. They return home tonight, but what do you think about this game against the Bulls? Won it on the last second shot, 125-122.
It just seems like the Pacers have the Bulls' number this season. The Bulls are a very talented team, but it doesn't really reflect that in the standings. However, I think they're getting hot at the right time. Halliburton, he's really starting to come back from that injury. He's been playing for a minute, but he hasn't been attacking like I know he can. And when he does attack, when he looks for his shot like he's doing right here, this team is just so much better. It takes the pressure off players like Buddy Hield, players like Miles Turner, and that way Tyrese Halliburton can do what he does best and distribute.
I mean, you look at this game, you look at the Mavericks game when he's scoring nearly 30-plus points. He got a little dinged up here. It says he's fine. He'll be questionable for tonight. But, these games where he's able to put up points in bunches and still get these 11 assists, I mean, you know, we see Halliburton, who maybe sometimes gets 14 points, 10, 11, 12 assists. He's more of a facilitator. But when he can score and then still dish the ball out, this team can be lethal. I mean, there's a great example of it where he finds Buddy Hield to go up for the Pacers. And it's just, I mean, come on, look at this. Look at this right here. Halliburton, last few seconds against Pat Bev from the logo. Are you kidding me? Look at that.
And it's crazy.
It's hard to defend.
It's crazy to think that there were people that didn't think Tyrese Halliburton deserved to be an all-star. It's plays like that on defenders like Patrick Beverley, of all guys, that he should be an all-star.
Really,
there was no question.
Since that all-star break, he's playing his best ball. Had the stretch where he was hurt, but he's playing his best basketball right now, and he's helping these Pacers. They're starting to rise to some new levels. They just jumped the Bulls in the standings, trying to sneak into the back end of the playoffs. I mean, do you give them any kind of shot if they do get in the playoffs? What's the end-of-season outlook look?
I think the Pacers are a team that could beat anybody but lose to anybody at the same time. They have guys stepping up like Jordan Nwora, a new acquisition from the Bucks. I mean, he's just gotten his first couple of starts. He looks pretty solid. You can tell that they're really trying to get him involved. Chris Duarte is really starting to hit his stride. He hit 5 threes. That was all of his 15 points last night. It's good to see him to get some buckets falling too.
That's something that Coach Carlisle said at the post-game as well, is that second unit, the big key to success. Because Duarte was able to come in, hit all those threes, you know, do what he was able to do. The rest of the team, McConnell played well. A lot of these second unit guys were able to come in and kind of keep up the slack. Typically we see the starting unit does their thing. Suddenly, you know, your second unit comes in and you're kind of faltering. And then, you know, they get, you know, down big or all these different things, and you have to try to mount that second half comeback. But if this second unit, if guys like Duarte and McConnell and Nwora, if he is not starting like he did yesterday, if these guys can come in and play well, this could be a dangerous team. They're starting to play with a little bit of depth here.
And we haven't even mentioned Rookie of the Year candidate and Sixth Man of the Year candidate, Benedict Mathurin, right? He's playing out of this world for just being a rookie. I mean, assuming the role, the amount of volume that he's had this year, I love to see it, really. I mean, he's a great defender. He's developing his shooting stroke. He's attacking the basket like a freight train. So, I mean, I love to watch him play.
And I like how they let him play late game. He doesn't start. Don't ask me why. I mean, he's probably their best player outside of Halliburton, but he doesn't start. He's that sixth man off the bench, and he gets to play late in games when it's very crucial in the fourth quarter. He always comes in and plays very well, especially on offense. Defensively, you know, there's still a little bit lacking there. He makes some, you can tell, rookie mistakes. You can tell this kid's a rookie, but like you said, I mean, he's playing very well, and they seem just to be firing on all cylinders.
And Miles Turner also having a very, very solid year. I mean,
scoring too, lately.
Exactly.
Scoring.
We've seen higher totals from him just in these last couple games than we've almost ever seen from Miles Turner, and he's really starting to shoot the long ball well too.
Yeah, it's been impressive. When the guy, I mean, he hit his career high with 8 or something threes a week ago, and he's been hitting his stroke. Buddy Hield's been doing his thing. This squad, they're firing on all cylinders. Tonight they will play the 76ers. What shot do you give them in this game against one of the best teams in the league?
We look at that matchup between Joel and Miles Turner. I like that matchup because Miles Turner's defense, it's epic. But this is Joel Embiid. This is an MVP candidate we're talking about. So it's going to be someone other than Joel Embiid, I should say, on the Sixers that has to get it done. But for the Pacers, if they play like they did last night, get everybody involved, get that second unit involved, like you said, they can beat anybody. But like I said, they can lose anybody as well.
Spread currently between 5 and 8 points. It keeps bouncing around different books. So currently the 76ers favored pretty heavily, you'd say. But, I mean, at home, the way the Pacers are playing, it seems like on the second night of a back-to-back, it's a night where they would fall back. I wouldn't take them to win this game, but they could very well just come in and do some damage, and we'll see if that's the case or not. So we'll be pulling for the Pacers tonight. When we come back, how about we bring on our racing correspondent, Lana Coons, to talk about the IndyCar season opener. That's next on Last Call.
Hey, it's Giselle here on 88.7 WICR.
88.7 The Diamond, the only jazz and classical station in Indianapolis, completely led by the students of the University of Indianapolis. Listen to us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn app, FM radio, HD radios, or even on our website at wicronline.org, a different kind of public radio.
Award-winning news coverage. Brought to you by ethical journalists that care about you. We have you covered on crime, latest on sports, and the best in entertainment. This is UIndy TV News.
Welcome back to Last Call. Nathaniel, Finch, Caden, Colford. The new addition, that is Landon Coons, our racing correspondent. How about we talk about a big weekend for IndyCar? They come in and play and go and do their first race of the season down in Florida, St. Petersburg. A beautiful day for racing, and I don't think it disappointed.
It truly didn't disappoint by any means. And when you say big, there was one thing that stood out, if you had to describe the word big, was all the crashes, especially this one early on here. You'll see here in just a moment, Felix Rosenquist brushes the wall, and then the massive pileup that comes in behind them. And here in just a moment, you'll see Devlin DeFrancesco get airborne. He gets absolutely speared by a fellow rookie driver, Benjamin Peterson. I'm not going to call out a rookie, but I don't know if he knows what a brake pedal is. As you'll see right here, this red car coming in frame here.
Yeah,
Bam.
Didn't look like I saw any brake lights when he did that. Right off the bat too, a big wreck right out of the gate. There was no shortage of accidents here. Look at this one where we saw Kyle Kirkwood went airborne.
Yeah, and I think that one was just a simple racing incident there. Rinus VeeKay got caught up, but this one I think was the absolute turning point right here in the race. Scott McLaughlin gets fresh tires off pit road. Romain Grosjean, hot pursuit. He's got warm tires, so he's got a big advantage on there. Two drivers going for the same piece of real estate. Both won that first win, and then disaster strikes for both of them. And obviously you can see Romain Grosjean just I felt dejected for Romain because he's never won a race yet.
This wasn't their only battle out of the pits. We saw McLaughlin earlier; they were really battling. And before this accident, it was basically their race for a good chunk of it, where they were going back and forth. And you could tell that they were very heated there, and it was definitely very heated for much of this race. But how about the end of it? What a finish we had here at St. Pete.
Yes, it was a fantastic finish. I don't think out of all those crashes, I think you could have had a better finish there for the end. Pato O'Ward, I believe, when coming out of the last corner, I believe he hit a button that hit the speed lane pit limiter thing. And it just basically shut the car off for him. He couldn't go, and it just allowed the defending Indy 500 champion Marcus Ericsson to slip on by with ease. There's a reason why they call him the sneaky Swede. He always shows up in the worst possible scenarios, and it worked out perfectly for him.
Yeah, it was a pretty fun race and a good start for IndyCar. What do we think in the rest of the season after the start?
Well, I think St. Pete is too early to tell. One, because it was just the first street course of the year, and a majority of it was a crash fest. It truly was. So I think there was a lot of great early contenders that went out early on, like Scott McLaughlin and Romain Grosjean. I think later on in the year, I think they're going to be pretty decent. I still think Indy 500 is too far down the line to tell. I think we could get a good idea of that once the series goes to Texas Motor Speedway next month for the PPG 375.
How about we talk about a little bit of NASCAR? It was a nice little exciting weekend in NASCAR as well, with William Byron getting the win. Hendrick Motorsports, 1, 2, and 3, they took the sweep at the top. It was pretty impressive in terms of that, and suddenly Chevrolet, they've won the first 3 races of the year for NASCAR. What do we think of that?
I think Chevy, really has a great thing going for their program right now. Last week they had Kyle Busch to just put on an absolutely dominating show in Fontana, and this weekend it's William Byron. And like you said, those Hendrick guys, it was a 1, 2, 3 finish for them with Willie Byron, Kyle Larson, and Alex Bowman. The Chevy camp looks strong. I think the only other team that looks actually competitive with them maybe Joe Gibbs Racing. The Toyotas look pretty dang strong too, but I think I got to give it to the Hendrick guys for now.
Caden, your thoughts on the NASCAR race? It was, you were pulling for a different driver. You thought that Busch should get the win, but what'd you think?
No, Kyle Busch has always been my guy. Since I was a little kid, Kyle Busch is always the guy. That's who I want to cross the checkered first. He didn't pull it out, but he was the guy that I told you to pick if you had to pick a driver. He's had a really great season up to this point. I don't know if he's going to be my pick next week, but he's for sure going to be in the mix.
I really do think, hopefully Phoenix is going to be better than it was last year because it's now the championship race. It was Joe Logano that won the race. It's not a good race providing track, but the spring races always seem to go better than the championship races here. So I think Phoenix is going to be very interesting next week.
Well, and we appreciate your input also with F1 this season starting, a pretty exciting little race there as well. Plenty to talk about in the racing world. We'll have you on here in the near future as all 3 of these circuits continue to go and continue to go. We had a great show today, though. We had so much to talk about with basketball conference tournaments. It's March Madness. I know, plenty of madness. We'll talk about all that next week, Monday at 4 o'clock.